Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Security Table. This is Chris Romeo, joined by my good friends Izar Tarandosh and Matt Coles. And today we're going to tackle an issue that came up as we were walking our way through the National Cybersecurity Strategy. We finally made it through 3 episodes. But we came up with this concept or this idea of reasonable software security. And I don't even remember how we got there. But this is an issue that I really want to tackle. I want to understand and discuss and debate what is reasonable software security, especially in the context of thinking about all of these different national cyber strategies and secure design and secure by default documents and things that are coming out. You know, we can even look through the lens of are those reasonable? But I think based on the experience of the group that we have assembled here, I think we can come to a pretty good idea as far as what's reasonable. We're going to start with an example, though, because we want to illustrate this point. And so I did a talk at RSA Conference, the State of the Union of Application Security last week. I guess it was this week, but it'll be last week when you listen to this. So pretend you're in the past or the future, whatever you want to do. And I put a slide up that showed various tooling that we have in application security. And first of all, one of my big points was too many people think AppSec equals tools. That's a whole other episode right there. But let's pinpoint this one particular issue. I drew a line, and under this line, I put the things in application security tooling that I don't think provide a decent return on investment today. And so one of those things that I put on that under that list was dynamic application security testing, or DAST. And the reasoning that I don't see the value in what DAST can provide, and ultimately I will say I think DAST is unreasonable, is I just don't see the return on investment for the findings that I get out of running a DAST tool. That's one issue. Second issue, I don't see DAST being able to run at the speed of DevOps. And so if I can't do something at the speed of DevOps, like I can do pen testing, I can do bug bounty as a secondary way of checking my live applications for known security vulnerabilities. But anything that I do in the pipeline perspective, it's got to be able to be fast enough to keep up with the speed of software development that I have doing. And so, Izar, Matt, am I being unreasonable here? Like, what are your thoughts on this idea of me making this statement that DAST falls under the line as far as what people should do from an application security scanning perspective?
I think you're being unreasonable, Chris. So, and I think it's important. What you're highlighting is really not a security problem, but a business problem of diligence and assurance versus speed. So, yes, DAST and SAST, if we're going to look at software applications, static application security testing, traditionally code analysis, but other things as well. And DAST, dynamic application security testing, traditionally scanners, whether that's web application or network vulnerability scanners, they are slow because they're thorough, or they can be tuned to be thorough. And that builds up assurance. So there's a business driver to be fast to deliver code. But if you do that and you do not take into account assurance, and assurance does take time because, well, you have a lot of developers writing code. They get either compiled or interpreted by various frameworks and integrated with other components. And so it takes time to do that analysis. And doing that analysis gives you assurance that security, yeah, I know, great. It gives you assurance that security is present. And so you can make an informed risk decision. We've talked about that in the past. So I think that this directly goes to the question of what is reasonable security. If you ignore those aspects and you don't focus on, if you ignore those aspects and you avoid that kind of analysis, then you may be making taking an unreasonable approach and deferring your security until later. And the important part about DAST is being proactive. So I'll leave it there and let Izar jump in if you.
Well, let me react to a couple of things first, and then Izar come back around. And I just want to let you guys know I can translate dog, and your dog was actually agreeing with me. So you probably didn't know that that's what I could.
It was obvious
hear there. So I want to be careful to separate SAST and DAST in this modern age right now, because yes, there are SaaS tools that are thorough and run for a long time, but there's also SaaS tools that move at the speed of DevOps, that can exist in the pipeline, that can run the checks and things that they need with a decent amount of speed, so that you don't have to do them out of context.
You know that those are actually grep, right? That's pretty much.
They are grep, but I mean, well, they're all effectively. I mean, if you go deeper into SaaS, right, you start creating code graphs and things like that, and you start looking for reachability. That's a different level than you got to decide what is the definition of SaaS, right? Is it a full code graph and software composition analysis capabilities where you're bringing libraries to the graph and you're able to analyze everything, or is it, what's the purpose of the security tool running in the pipeline? And so that's my challenge with DAST. Like, if you could give me a DAST tool that will only run and check what was changed with my code commit, now we're starting to talk about something. Now we got something, because you don't have to scan the whole application. You could scan the whole application out of band, but if you could scan just what I changed, now we're starting to talk about something that can move at the speed of DevOps. But I don't think any of these tools do that. I've talked too long. Izar, what are your thoughts on this?
So, in my constant search to be a better application security or security professional, I am really, 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 really trying to stay away from absolutes. And I think that this is a great discussion, partly because of that, because at the end of the day, the question is reasonable to whom, right? So we are talking about, it sounds like we are talking about this hypothetical organization where you have DevOps running at the speed of light and things happening at the right way, the right order. But as professionals, we are serving a spectrum here of people. We have the startup with one guy, and we have the multinational with 1,000 people in the security team. And then comes the question, what's reasonable to whom in that spectrum? So perhaps to that guy, the startup guy, DAST is his way to check for a laptop 10, and he runs it once a day at the speed of his development, and that's reasonable. And the other side of the spectrum, as you said, it's not, right? Perhaps what we need is to, again, calibrate when are we running this thing? Why do we have to run it against the whole product? Going to your point of just go to the changes. Perhaps, I don't know, I might be thinking of buying the Sky Vision, but we are asking so much of the developer. Why can't they run it locally on whatever changes they know that they made? They can point it to the right place. They can point to the place where so it's just one more unit test, one more thing in their testing workflow. So my thought is that it's not a matter of you are being unreasonable or not. I think that you are pointing at a very real problem with the category of tools, right? But perhaps the answer is not in let's change tools. It is let's change how we use the tool. Mm-hmm. Perhaps it is not. Is it bad for everybody? Is it good for everybody? Is it good for enough people so that it still deserves a place in the toolbox?
And maybe we should just take a brief moment to talk about, because Chris, you raised the notion of there are different types of SaaS tools, right? And grep all the way through, code graph generation and reachability and code coverage tools and other things brought into that. DAST, I think we have a similar situation with DAST, right? Just based on the nature of the vulnerabilities or weaknesses that it tends to find, right? So on a per page, let's say web application scanners is a good example, on a per page basis. So if somebody's going to load it, if you go to a web page, you go to a particular web page, you're going to find particular problems with, cross-site scripting, for instance, that may live because of a form element that's present on the page, or XML injection or other things that may exist specifically because of the page that you're looking at. You go to that URL, or you look at that page. But there's a whole class of issues that DAST tools can find, which require logic, migration through the application, whether that requires authentication or other activities to get to the page in the first place, that sets up the conditions for that vulnerability to exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's certainly unfair for me to have said that you're unreasonable, and as are rightly called out, that what really, it's a little bit much more nuanced than that. Right, it's this notion of throwing the tool at something and require it to be fast and accurate in all cases, as opposed to tailoring it for a particular use case and I'll call again to the assurance case, to meet the assurance claims or to meet the assurance objectives that you have in terms of what you consider is reasonable from a commercial standpoint, versus what your customers or regulators or others might consider reasonable from a due diligence standpoint.
Let me kind of reflect on my experiences with DAST, and I'd love to hear if either of you have had different experiences, and perhaps obviously my experiences are jading my conclusions here, right? Like I can only reflect on what I've experienced and what I've heard other people talk about. But so a number of years ago, I had a procurement requirement that I had to have DAST for a web-based application. So, I immediately didn't want to do it, but it was a procurement requirement. And so I didn't have any choice. I had to do it. And so I went and I said, okay, I'm going to look for, because I'm not a checkbox compliance person. I like value for my dollar, especially, when you don't have a gigantic budget. Like I wanted some return on my investment here. I wanted to see value coming out of this. And so I looked at all the different providers of DAST tools that I could find in the market. And I noticed a number of different trends. One, nobody could really scan a single page application well. And we have lived in a world of single page applications that are driven by React and Angular and all of our other frameworks for a number of years now. And so I noticed there was definitely an innovation miss on being able to understand and scan something like a single page application. So that was my first challenge. And that was really my primary challenge. I was looking for value coming out of this thing. Like, what am I going to get? I'm going to spend this money. It's more money than I want to spend. I want to see the results coming out of it. And I can say that running that thing for a number of years as a contractual requirement from a procurement team, I never got a single finding out of it of value. And maybe I'm just driving teams that are really good at AppSec. We know that's not the case. Like developers make mistakes as they go. I know there were problems in that thing because we found them with our other tools, with our SaaS tools and things that were running in the pipeline. We found issues, but I just never saw the value proposition there. And so I'd love to hear if you guys have different experiences, I'd love to hear your side of this, because maybe you had a really good impact from DAST and you can help me to kind of see this a little bit differently.
So I think, so I don't know that I'm not sure that I would be able to alleviate what you were talking about, but I think pulling value from DAST, first off, it's probably important to mention, so single page applications that you're talking about, just want to make sure single page or single, because obviously you may have the URL that doesn't change and you're navigating through an Ajax application, for instance, or JavaScript that has multiple pages that are resources within the application, but the URL itself never changes. So things like spidering doesn't work very well, right? You have to navigate through the site. And that's a challenge that requires a human to train it, or you provide a Postman collection to make that tool effective, because you have to help it. There's nothing on the system that gives a hint as to what the navigation should be through the system, right? There's no page tree in that respect. So those techniques, I think, get developed over time that help alleviate that problem. And I would highlight just one tool in particular, and actually there's two tools, right? There's Burp Suite, which pen testers tend to use, and then OWASP Zap, which do very well in those situations if trained properly, right? And I know there's others out there like tools from formerly IBM and
formerly HP,
Qualys,
formerly Ford,
Qualys as well. various dynamic web scanners that can be trained. And once trained, they may be more effective. So part of this is the tool, relying on the tools to sort of automatically do everything correctly has changed because the technology has changed, right? The URL used to be something that got modified every time you made a click, and that no longer happens. So the tool had to adapt, and you can't really solve it, I think, in 100% of the cases. And so that's probably maybe that's the biggest comment I want to make is the technologies, the
training,
the systems, the technologies that are part of the stack have evolved, and the tools haven't always kept up to speed with those things over time.
Yeah, let me react to that, and then I want to come back to you. But when I first of all, I love OWASP Zap and I love Burp. Neither one of those was created as a DAST tool. Right?
Right.
They're bread and butter. Zap's bread and butter. We all used it when we first learned about Zap when it first came out. It's a proxy, right? It's a proxy that lets me turn on the proxy, stop a request as it goes out, look at it, analyze it, modify it, hit the button to let it go, get the response back. I can debug. I can look for issues in the way that data is being sent back and forth. And so Zap then grew to become a DAST tool. But its bread and butter, I think, is still in the kind of the manual testers. And I think Burp is the same way. I remember Burp starting as a more of a pen tester's tool that you were using to modify requests and things and have all and they're great at that, all the tracing and being able to track past things I did. I can't remember what I did. Let me look in the history, and I've got all that there. But I love both of those tools, but I don't think of those as DAST first tools. I think of them as DAST second or maybe third or in their priorities.
But Qualys and other tools have adapted to those changes in the technology as well to support things like training through an application, right? Not relying on discovery. So discovery being the broken technology here that allowed you to not get or caused you to not get value most likely out of the tool because of the nature of the technology stack. Right.
Now, I would expect the technology at this day and age, though, to be able to, I shouldn't have to feed it a bunch of manual work that I did to understand. Like, I could probably, within 6 months from now, I can point ChatGPT at it and tell ChatGPT to use its, it has browsing capabilities now. I can point it at that web app and say, tell me all the different routes that exist. Create a route map for me from that.
So here's the thing. I am 5'7", which in barbarian units is 170 meters. And as such, I am a big lover of low-hanging fruit. And I think that...
You should mention that you're a martial artist as well, just to put this in the context.
So... my point here is that, you know what, again, you guys are going towards the medium to advanced practitioner in there, the one that's able to get a proxy and elevate it to a DAST-like tool, or the person who's able to craft their own URLs, doing the interactions in the requests and all that good stuff. But again, not the whole world is that. Some people do need to point at one URL, click a button, and get something at the end of the day, because that's where they live, right? And I think that it's good that we have that solution for them. And while I do agree, I'm a huge fan of both Burp and Zap, and my God, the way that Zap has advanced in the past few years with that HUD thing and all that stuff, it's just mind-blowing. But it advances towards a point where you need to, almost be a paint tester to take everything that you can out of the tool. And we do have to realize that, especially ourselves as trainers and educators and all that good stuff, we have to realize that the tool itself has a role in both providing the low-hanging fruit and being a vehicle to teaching people and to training people to go to the next step. So I think that it's good that we have those simple tools, and by God, I would never call Web Inspect simple in any way, shape, or form. But I think that it's good that we have those little engines that almost could, that we can point people to and simple applications to and still get something out of it. It's not like, oh, I don't think that this can give me anything useful, or oh, it didn't give me any findings, so that means that I must be secure or not. We all know that's not where things live. But to be able to say, hey, at this time, what I can do is this with the resources and knowledge that I have, I think that's pretty reasonable.
We should also probably keep in mind here, the reason for running DAST. You started this, Chris, with the reason why you ran DAST was because there was a checkbox requirement, right? There was a procurement requirement. You must run this.
I was being forced.
Yeah, I was being forced, right? But if you had a web page, if you just had a single web page application, right? You may not choose to run a tool like that because it would be too expensive, not enough value, right? Cost benefit wouldn't work out. And there's other means like code analysis or even manual code review that can be just as effective to find the same problems rather than spending oodles of money on a scanning service or a scanning tool. And so, some realism, I guess some common sense needs to be applied eventually here of what is the best tool. And I'm using tool more broadly here than something you buy, but what is the best option for meeting the goals, the objectives that you have with respect to security based on the technologies that you're using. And so with that, that should be part of what is going back to reasonable security, right? Reasonable security is a set of best practices that says if you're looking to do X, run or do Y, and you may have a collection of those things. And reasonable should take into account.
Is it?
What?
Is it? Let's go back to that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but the question of what is reasonable should be, well, based on this X versus Y thing, what could and what should you do versus what will you do because of all of the cost benefit analysis that gets done and the value that you get out of it. Directly back to your point, Chris, about I wouldn't run DAST because I wasn't going to get much value or wasn't seeing much value out of it. But I have other things in place, other defenses and other techniques that I apply that can give me the exact same value.
And that's where I was. That's where I was, right? Like we had SAST and SCA with every commit, every PR that's going by. We had code review happening, and we had RASP agent running in the runtime of the application itself.
And you had a WAF, I would assume.
No.
Look,
no.
Can we?
That's a whole other. Don't get me fired up again. I was supposed to constrain this to DAST and not. You just threw that hand grenade to me, and I caught it, and I went yes.
So can we agree that at the bottom line, okay? I think that we can safely say that the best security tool there is out there is a very experienced, very talented security engineer that can find a problem, create a POC that proves it, and point to the line of code and say this is the solution that needs to happen in this line of code.
And is a robot,
and
is a robot who can work 24/7 and be infallible.
No.
Wow.
That's later. That's the next step. So
infallible.
The best tool would be the best tool would be that person doing those things, right? And what we are constantly trying to do is create some way to multiply that capability times millions.
Yep.
And that's where we start failing because we have to reproduce a lot of talent and a lot of conceptual stuff that ChatGPT apart is still very hard to do. And then we go to those absolutes that my SAST found this set of things, my DAST found this set of things, my YAST identified this set of things, and my RASP complied about this set of things. What I'm lacking here, and that I think would go a lot towards duplicating that best tool, is I haven't seen yet something that brings together all those sensors and says the amount of evidence that I have that this thing is a true positive based on all these sensors is this much.
I mean,
So
that's why
we keep talking in silos. I'm running SAST, I'm running DAST, but
Yeah.
we are talking past each other in the tools.
one of the other things I talked about in my RSA talk was like I see SAST and SCA coming together. I don't see the necessity of two separate tools.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There should be I don't know what we would call it. We'd have to find a way to blend the two sets of acronyms together into something funny, which I can't think of off the top of my head. Or NAST. Did you call it NAST? It's NAST.
No, SCAST.
SCAST. Oh, I like that. Oh, you heard it here first. SCAST is a new category of application security tools. But you think about like to the point I made earlier about talking about SaaS and getting to the code graph. Right. If you're going to that level already, you might as well just plug the dependency information into everything that you were able to exhume from the source code that you went through and scanned to build the graph out. Like, why not pull the dependencies and whatnot into one big picture and then find ways to look through the whole thing and look for challenging points? So I think that's
we should
some people will.
Sorry, we should plug a tool that actually does that. If we're going to talk about that, so Veracode, is an offering through their SaaS platform that provides that correlation, I believe, or at least it used to. I don't know if it still does, but it used to.
I mean, if we're talking about live tools, then let me tell you like what kind of got me thinking about this. So Shift Left has recently, just in the last month or two, rebranded as Quiet.ai, QWIET. But they're doing two things that got my attention. One of them is this code graph with this full on kind of combination of dependency, vulnerability information, and source code vulnerabilities. They've also are the first company that I've seen that's applied the AI model directly into the tool. Now, they did it. I asked because I had the same skepticism you did, Matt, that I just saw on your face. I asked them, I said, hey, everybody's saying this. Like, how'd you get there? How'd you get there so fast? Well, they had whoever funded them had a partner company that was doing AI models. And so they were able to take some existing work and apply it to kind of apply whatever source code scanning knowledge. I don't understand. I can't even pretend like I understand how all that works. But they were able to extract that into a custom model that then they attach to their tool that's in production today. And so that's what really got me thinking about that whole process, though, is that they had already started to bridge SAST and SCA. And I saw another number of other vendors at the RSA conference that are either building their own tools and giving you an all-inclusive pipeline that has SAST, SCA, other things that they've built them themselves, so they're all fully integrated to begin with. To Izar's point about silos and the challenges we have here. But then you also have the challenge of there's no longer best of breed. There is only, maybe your SAST is great, but your SCA is not that great. Now I'm locked into your
pipeline. And your
so
stack A or stack B, not cherry pick from pieces, right?
And this is Chris Romeo reporting from the RSA conference floor. Like, I felt like I just gave you all the dump of what I saw.
But wait. Brooke told us that there is a company there that said that they were going to protect everything.
Done.
So I guess that we are out of a job.
I guess we can just end the podcast here. Like, this will be our final episode because we have heard that security has been solved and we are able to just maybe take up, I don't know what we would do. What would we do with it? Who knows?
Next week, privacy.
Okay, so we're already talking about tools I saw at RSA conference. I'm going to keep going. Because I saw something interesting that might catch your attention that I haven't seen anybody.
ITM on a presentation.
It was a single pane of glass for security.
Oh my God!
No, I'm not.
Where's the jar? Where's the jar?
That was a joke. That was going back to the beginning.
No. Tell me more. I never heard of that. I'm interested.
The beginning of the security table. That was our joke. That Izar
Take my money.
It may have even been one of the first words of the day. Might have been single pane of glass. But let me tell you about this other company I saw because it's pretty interesting, and I haven't seen anybody else do this yet. Company's called
Planes of Gas.
No.
Company's
called Prividu. They were in the early stage expo, and what they're doing, they have an engine that scans source code repos for the usage of PII. And so what they do is they give you a view of how your app is using PII. They're not scanning this repo for PII because there's none there, but there is references to using things like emails. And what it lets you do is it lets you take your privacy policy and build up a standard for your applications as far as what PII can be used, how it can be used, and then it'll go through and flag anything that's outside of that policy. And so it was interesting to me because I saw this is the first time I've seen anybody apply that type of technology to the world of the kind of the concerns of privacy. We've always been scanning code for security vulnerabilities, but I thought that's kind of an interesting kind of new area that's being defined.
If you've ever used if you've ever used a SaaS tool and some of the experimental checkers that many tools I think have nowadays, horrible false positive rates when it comes to, you're using PII because you have email in a variable name or in a comment, right? And therefore, it's hard-coded. You have a hard-coded password, or you have a sensitive information needs to be. No, it's just a variable name.
Yeah, so I have a term for that I've been using for a while. It's called rumor-based detection.
Rumor-based detection.
Yeah. I heard that you are using private data around here, so I think I'm going to flag it. I heard something that looks like an SSN here, so I think I'm going to flag it.
Yeah, so I think these folks are further along than kind of the experimental checkers. So it's worth taking a look. It's a new category, and we know it's needed because nobody's ever really dealt with PII in how you're using it in applications other than I've only seen people do it manually. I've never seen anybody have a way to understand how PII is being used. And they were telling me that, a lot of their customers, it's the legal teams, it's the privacy teams are the ones that are using it. They're the ones that want to know what is our exposure, what is our risk, what's our liability ultimately for using PII across, and imagine you have 5,000 applications. It gets tough to really understand how good are we at protecting the privacy of our customers.
I just wonder how reliable that could be at static analysis time, right? Because this application doesn't have the data itself that's private, that needs to be protected. And how do you tell the code, well, you're going to read data from a database, and that data has certain attributes that says it's private data, customers, social security numbers, for instance, and without either using descriptors or annotations or really interesting
it's
variable
almost
names.
Like you're saying that misses context.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't get that deep into the demo.
I mean, look, sometimes I feel like nobody does anything with PII, right? Whatever. So any tool in the space is more than welcome. And if they take this ahead by far, hey, great. My experiences with PII-based tools of late, and a couple of years of late, have been that, first of all, you give me a data catalog. So you tell me what's important for you. I'm going to find where it is, and I'm going to label it. Mm-hmm. And then the legal looks at you and says, we don't know how to do that. And then security looks at you and says, I don't have anybody to do that. And then Deb says, data catalog, what's the data catalog? And meanwhile, everybody goes putting APIs everywhere and Lord knows what. Mm-hmm. So anything that can take that guesswork and handwork off of mapping data catalogs, I think, data dictionaries is a good thing.
Yeah. All right, so let's tease out a future conversation because I feel like we just scratched the surface of reasonable software security. Like we kind of worked our way through that example, and you gave me some stuff to think about as far as, am I being too harsh? Perhaps, maybe I've been, people have said that maybe I'm too harsh. It's okay.
Hey, Matt said that I was going to be that I was being nuanced. It's the first time in my life. I'm still trying to absorb the comments.
Enjoy the moment, enjoy.
So yeah, indeed.
Yeah, that's a groundbreaking moment, being advanced.
Or just to say, not quite enjoy, but something a bit more nuanced.
Yeah, so like where do we go? Like what, like before we wrap up, we just got a couple of minutes left, but what like if we think high level, if we had to say three things in the world of application security and product security are reasonable, the reasonable activities. I mean, we're all going to agree on threat modeling because we love it and we think
Yep.
it's the best thing on earth. So we can just put that one. That's one. So we've got one slot taken up by threat modeling just because of the value from being able to understand design and understand what it is you're actually building and thinking about security and privacy characteristics of those things. But if we had two other things we can put on the list, what's reasonable?
I think that for me, one of them that I don't see a lot of people doing, and my God, this could be an episode right by itself. It's the identification of the level of risk that they are under and their risk appetite. I think that that's something that people don't look into enough, and that it's reasonable to say, hey, for the size of your business and your average customer and what you do with their stuff, what exactly is your risk appetite? And then from there, you could move to what's reasonable security for you.
So it's really macro level conditions
Yes.
that dictate security, because I've heard you a number of times around the security table. You come back to this, which is good. You're pressing our thinking about there's different sizes of companies. There's startups. There's small. There's medium. There's large enterprise. They don't all have the same risk profile. They don't all have the same ability to execute. They can't spend the same percentage of revenue to secure the things that they build. And so it sounds like when I'm listening hearing what you're saying, it's like there's a macro condition that we could understand about that would help drive what's reasonable. So what's reasonable for the startup is not what's reasonable for the enterprise. But you're kind of saying one of those things would be making that determination right up front.
I think that what I'm trying to say is that we saw in the policy that the word reasonable is being used, and I did some reading just to see what's reasonable in terms of law. And we keep going back at reasonable here as a constant, and it's actually a function. And I think that we have to identify what that function is, what the arguments for that function are.
Dude,
because it's a bit more complex than what we think.
That is one of the
reasonable
deepest.
For you is not reasonable for you.
That's one of the deepest things. Like you should write a blog post about that right there. About
okay,
it's not
nuanced and deep.
It's not a constant. It's a function. Come on, man.
Do you guys know something that I don't?
That's a T-shirt. It's not a constant. It's security is not a constant. It's a function. I'm just trying to make it. I'm trying to market it now.
I would use that T-shirt.
Yeah, but I mean that's just. Yeah, you really, that's a great way to illustrate it from a developer perspective, using that kind of developer language that, it's not.
Well, you always told us that security is a journey, right?
That's true.
And yes, it is. But I'm thinking that for us, security people, security is a journey. But for developers, for companies at all, for anybody who needs to perform security, not as a practitioner, it's a function. Yeah. It's what we keep saying when we threat model, right? You have to know when too much security is too much.
Yeah, because there is such
and
a
that's
case.
Part of the
enough
function.
is enough.
Yeah.
Or when is enough.
All right, so we're gonna end our conversation for today here. And with I was happy to be joined by the advanced and deep and nuanced.
But wait, we missed the third point. Matt, do you have one? So it's threat modeling. It's the function of security, and
I'm going to go with identifying some solid assurance objectives and putting a level of rigor in place. Right, rush to market it needs to be balanced with what can you and what do you want to claim from a security standpoint. Threat modeling helps with architecture and requirements and design, but ultimately what you build. And I'm not saying that means you have to do DAST or you have to do STAST or you have to do whatever, but understand, make your judgment calls, right? When you get to risk, you'll be thinking yourself that you lined all these ducks in a row first before making that decision.
Yeah. I love the fact that you come back, Matt, all the time to that word assurance. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm old school. Like, I love the idea of security assurance. What can I do to prove that this thing that I'm building is more secure or is at a certain level of security or whatever is so crucial.
And it's not incompatible with DevOps or DevSecOps, right? None of these are incompatible terms, right? So.
Yeah, I think these are all. So yeah, we got a lot more work to do as far as discussing reasonable software security, but we at least have a framework now of threat modeling, that what we're going to call the security function, and security assurance as our three kind of pillars to build off from. So, folks, thanks for listening to the Security Table, and tune in for a future episode where we're going to continue this conversation and really unpack what each of these things means and how they come together to really provide reasonable software security.